30 Years of Legend of the Five Rings is a series of interviews celebrating 3 decades since the debut of L5R at Gen Con 1995. In this second series of the Play to Win podcast from Aconyte Books, we'll explore the perspectives of the people who had a hand in the franchise's making, past and present, the lasting impacts L5R has had on their lives, and what about L5R has made it an enduring force in the tabletop games industry after all these years. I'm your host, Katrina Ostrander, and I'm the creative director of story and setting with the franchise development team at Asmodee. I've had the privilege of working on L5R in various roles since 2015, including as writer, fiction editor, RPG developer, and story lead. In my current role, I help oversee the brand's development as it expands further into novels, comic books, video games, board games, and more. But before that, I was simply a big fan of the setting. In this episode, I'm joined by Steve Horvath. He's been involved with Legend of the Five Rings for its entire history, from before the game's official launch to his retirement from Asmodee in late 2024. Our conversation begins in the 90s and continues to the 2000s, when the brand started to face challenges brought on by its own success, and onward to the sale of the brand to Fantasy Flight Games in 2015. We look at the franchise's present and its future, and Steve shares some of his favorite recent releases, as well as how much he is looking forward to the release of Champions of Rokugan. So, here we go. So we're really excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Could you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your history with L5R?
I'm Steve Horvath. I was involved with the game on and off for its entire history. I learned the game as a retailer at an open house before it launched. I was a top 4 player at the Day of Thunder. I was ranked 6th in the world when Wizards of the Coast hired me, and I eventually became a brand manager for the game. Then I kind of moved on for a while and then was involved again when I was at Fantasy Flight Games. I did the negotiations to bring L5R over into the fold for FFG. I was involved in some of the role play stuff after that. And I made the deal for Champions of Rokugan, which is a game I can't wait to come out with. And I worked with the Aconyte team for some of the fiction stuff before I left as well. So I've had a very, very rich history with the game from the very beginning.
That's incredible. So when you learned the game or when you were first introduced to it, what stood out about it, or why did it resonate with you so much, you think?
The story had a lot to do with it in the presentation of it. So John Wick, who was the lead for the fiction and background and stuff for the game, taught the game to me at an open house. And he gave me 2 decks. He gave me a dragon deck and a lion deck, and then pulled out Togashi Yukuni and explained him to me and why he was so cool and why those 2 clans were so cool. And it turns out those were my 2 favorite clans. Dragon was always my favorite clan, and lion was number 2, even to this day. Right? He's a very good storyteller, and he just kind of blew me away with the narrative. And as he was teaching me the game, he was inserting all of this story and really immersing me into it. And so I was hooked to start with. I went back to my store, told all the trading card players, it's like, this is the new game we're going to play. And when it came out, everybody bought in, and we were totally hooked on the story and how players could affect the story and just the world, right? It was so different and interesting at the time.
Yeah. So you had a store, you were a game store owner at that period of time?
Yes. And we became one of the premier stores for Legend of the Five Rings at the time. That ended up, for me, outselling Magic or any other card game.
Wow.
I was really enthusiastic about it, and that kind of caught on with the store. And then all the regulars got into it. They got enthusiastic about it. And so everyone became an evangelist. So anyone that came by, they heard the pitch, right? And I did things like give out clan swords to people if they would buy the starter deck and get in, because I had some extras, and those were hard to get. And it just created a big community. And it got to the point where at one time, before I got hired by Wizards of the Coast, 5 of the top 10 players in the world, including myself, were playing out of my store. So those weekly events were very, very competitive.
I was going to say, what do you think about is just everybody getting together and getting to practice all that time? Or what do you think fostered a training grounds, almost like a dojo for some of the top L5R players?
I had a lot of young teenagers playing at the time too, as well as adults. And those kids would come in and just play every single day. And then the adults would come in and play sometimes after work and over the weekends. And like I said, I ran a weekly event even if I didn't have prize support, because they weren't really support, like weekly events in stores was a big deal at that time, right? And I would give out prizes, charge a small fee and give out prizes based off of that. And so people just really were excited about the chance to play in a tournament, like an official event every week. So then they were practicing for it all the time. And then for Day of Thunder, there was a group of like 6 of us that went to play, and we were training every day. I mean, I was playing as much L5R as I could for months and months and months in advance, and determined of my 2 favorite clans, Dragon and Lion, that Lion had the best chance to win. So I honed in on a Lion deck, and just played it to death against everything, every possible combination, again and again and again. And that group of us went to Gen Con and played in that event. It was like over 350 players. It started out as up to the top 32, it was double elimination, and then it was single elimination after that. I lost the very first game to a crazy unicorn deck with like an Ogre Bushi and all this crazy stuff. And it was like, I'd never seen anything like it. And then I was like, well, I don't know how much farther I'm going to go, because the next loss is it for me. And the next loss didn't happen again until the final 4 against a guy named Bergstrom, who won it. He was also running an aggressive Lion deck like I was, and he just got the jump on me. And I knew he would beat the Crane, because the deck was designed to beat that Crane honor deck.
To backtrack a little bit to your time with your events in your store, are there any that like really stand out to you as like particularly memorable?
The weekly events, it's hard to come up with one that was really bigger over the others, but it's just the people that came through and played, right? Like there were, like I said, in the store, there was 5 of the top 10 players in the world, and other top 10 players would come to play in the bigger events that we ran in the store, right? Because it was such a challenge, and we cultivated such a passion and following for the game. Like I said, it outsold Magic, so I was selling a lot of it. I mean, we would have weekly events that had 30 plus players in it, right? And most of them were local, but plenty would travel from other parts of the city, or even from other cities, to come like once a month for a big showdown event. And those could get over 40. I mean, my store was only 900 square feet. It was overrun during those times. It was very exciting. And as we got into playing more major events and winning them or placing very highly, that just upped the level of commitment and excitement and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. I know, like, thinking back to my experience at Gen Con 2017 when the Living Card game released,
Yeah.
you had people cosplaying as their favorite characters. You had people, like, wearing clan jerseys. Like, did that get its start all the way back at the beginning?
Oh, yeah. So people were really committed to the game, and not just about winning. So, like I said, I was a dragon player mostly. I played between dragon and lion, but there was a point in the storyline where it was clear that Hitomi was going to become corrupted. And so then a group of players within the dragon community said, no, we don't want that to happen. And so they started the Light Hitomi movement. And so we all committed to playing, anytime we played dragon, we would not play with any corruption, and we would not fight each other, right? And so people would bow out or concede, and they would play with no corruption, even though it meant playing with a handicap, and did it so much so that eventually she got redeemed in the story, right? And so that just made people just so fanatic for their clans and their movements and stuff. I mean, there were some people that played just to play, but 95+% of the players that you ran into had favorite clans, had favorite characters, all that kind of stuff. I got into a big feud. So I was ranked 6th in the world towards the end before I got hired by Wizards of the Coast. And I was the number 2 dragon player in the world. And in the storyline, Hitomi's brother was hunting her. Miramuto Date, I think is what his name was. And I wanted him out of the clan for this, right? And so I started trading and collecting all of his cards that I could get. I would trade rares for commons or uncommons until I had a binder inches thick with
What?
over 500 copies of the card. And so then the Dragon Warlord challenged me at a con in LA, and I played him for the fate of that character, and I won. So that was it for him, because the Warlord wanted him in because he was a staple card in a lot of Dragon decks. Right? But the story was more important to me. And so I ended up beating him, and that decided his fate.
So was that at a convention then? Like a
Yeah, it was a convention in LA. Yes.
Okay.
And so we talked to Reese Sosby at the time, and she says, okay, you guys play, and the winner's going to tell me. And I won, and that was that.
So there were members of the story team that would go to these events and like kind of
Yeah.
document, and the community would
Yeah.
document this too, right?
Yes. But Reed herself, who was the lead story person, she was there at that event.
Wow. That's like just such a level of story integration with the game that I don't know that any other game has ever come close to.
No, they haven't. No.
I guess in terms of what else made L5R stand apart from the crowd, like it was a pretty crowded market, as I understand, for CCGs kind of before the bottom fell out a couple of years after Magic.
Yeah.
But among the people in your store and amongst yourself, like what would you say was the thing that appealed to folks most, or was it these story prizes?
Well, I think people have an innate desire to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Mm.
Right. And the passion that was around this game for the characters and the story and all of that stuff, right, just created this community that people wanted to be a part of, right? They did. I got hired at Wizards of the Coast. I was a brand manager for the game for a while, but then I moved on to another company and moved away from the game for years. And I would run into people at conventions, and they knew who I was because of Day of Thunder and some of the story things I did. And they were like, oh, yeah. And there were still people that I played against or with when I was playing that were still playing the game, right? So it had a longevity that a lot of other games did not have, right? For my store, store owners have a big influence about what's played at their games and what does really well. And I was so excited about this. It got infectious to a lot of the regulars, and then they became evangelists. And so everybody wanted to get on board. If they came in and saw a weekly tournament with 34 players, they're like, oh, kind of what's going on here? I want to be involved in this.
So it kind of snowballed then.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Day of Thunder, because I feel like you speed ran us through it a little bit, maybe like your deck.
Sure, I did. Yeah. Yeah. It was a big deal.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, did you have to pre-qualify for the event?
No, that was open at the beginning there, right? Like I said, there was over 350 players there, right? And they did a double elimination system, which sounds crazy today, but people did it back then, right? To the top 32. And like I said, I lost the very first match to a unicorn player playing just crazy cards. And I thought, I worked for months training for this event, playing I don't know how many hundreds of games I played over those months, maybe 1,000+ games, and never seen anything like this. And it just took me by surprise. And then I just threw it off and just went into the next round, won again, started seeing decks I was familiar with. I remember playing against a guy from France who was playing a Phoenix Honor deck. And I beat him with some counterattacks and traversable terrain and stuff. And even though I couldn't understand him, when a friend came up, he was explaining how he lost. And I heard traversable terrain as I got this lucky combo out to wipe him out, right? And probably the biggest match for me was either top 16 or top 8. I can't remember. I was playing against a Taturi's Army player. And he took turn 2 or 3, he took a province with Takashi Mitsu. And he got me down to 2 provinces pretty quickly. And he hadn't lost anything, and it looked really bad. And then it just became a slog, and it was getting close. And he came after one of my provinces with everything. It was overwhelming. And so I defended with everything I had at the other province because I had a counterattack in my hand and a rally cry and another counterattack. So I was just praying he didn't have a rallying cry when he attacked that province. So I just gave it up. He won it. He goes back and he goes to start doing something like, no, hold on. Counterattack. I go and take one province, right? Rally cry. Counterattack. I take a second province, right? And everybody just is going wild because then on my turn, I was able to split my forces and take him out because he was committed, right?
Yeah. So when you were you playing to see like a specific story outcome? Because I've heard like some people were trying to like reveal themselves as like corrupted elemental masters and like...
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that stuff going on. I was just hoping to beat Fu Lang and beat the darkness, right? So I was playing an honorable lion, right? So I was hoping to see the Seven Thunders win the day.
Yeah.
No, the story team and the AEG guys were really nervous. I mean, Dave Williams was saying, I have a lion deck. If someone commits to Shadowlands, I'm going to challenge them. And people, it was really emotional when a clan got eliminated towards the end. John Wick would take their final letter and he would tear it up. And there were grown men crying. There really were. And then when he read the final storyline and how it all played out, everybody was choked up, myself included.
Yeah, it sounds like everyone I've talked to is kind of like you had to be there. I don't know that there's like any photographs or like there's hardly anything to kind of document.
Yeah, I have a couple personal pictures, I think, from that time, but it can't really, it's very interesting. It's hard to explain if you weren't there because it was so emotional and it was so like, you've never seen anything like that before, right? But then it kind of was a two-edged sword in some ways because I feel like when I was the brand manager for the game and like several years later at Wizards of the Coast, we ran a much bigger event that I felt personally was more impactful, like a bigger thing. But Day of Thunder took on this mythical aspect to it, right? That it just couldn't be topped.
Yeah.
And I understand why, even though it was a little frustrating because we put so much into some of those big Gen Con tournaments later on, but everybody just referred back to the Day of Thunder, right? And it was just, it was something that had never been seen before and you just couldn't duplicate it.
Yeah, lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of it was, it wasn't engineered, it happened, right? And part of it was at that point, there was a point where the game was supposed to end then. That's what they said in the beginning. There's going to be 5 sets and that's it, right? And so there was all this emotion and stuff coming, and then they said, well, obviously we can't stop it now. It's just way too popular, right? But there were people that thought leading up to it, before they announced they were going to do more, well, this is going to be, and it just grew organically, and they did a great job, right? It was a small team of really dedicated people, and it just came together and it showed, right? And so there was just no way to really duplicate that ever again.
Yeah. The L5R community, I think in my like perception, always has been incredibly passionate and like it's always been really community focused.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Maybe sometimes to its detriment. And what I mean by that is, as it got to a certain size, the community was so invested, it made it hard for new players to come in that didn't have a 10-year history of the lore. At that point, I could tell you everything about every clan that ever happened during the history of the game. And you come in new to that, well, that's really intimidating, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of worked against it after a while. But there's people that have been involved the whole way. There was a kid, I call him a kid, he was 13 at the time when the game came out, I think somewhere around there, 12 to 14, named Brian Reese, who was one of the big players. And he kept playing and he went on to win a world championship. And then he became one of the lead designers of the game for a period of time. And I talked to him recently. He's been involved. He's running a L5R RPG that's been going on for 6 years now.
Wow.
So he's still invested.
Yeah. So there's the storyline and then there's the sense of community. And there's like these factions that you can really identify with. Like it's kind of like a recipe for just people really like identifying with the game.
Like lions appeal to like people that like paladins, that type of, and the scorpions appeal to the rogue type people, and sneaky, and dragons, a master of all trade, or a jack of all trades, but a master of none, all of this other kind of stuff. They appeal to certain players. The unicorn appealed to people that like to think they're the outsiders, and so there were things to draw you in to really make you feel part of that clan and really embrace it and really immerse yourself into it. Other games have really struggled to do that.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the clan specific stuff that players could get into? Like, I understand that you could join the Imperial Assembly and like subscribe to the Imperial Herald.
Yeah, so if you were part of the Imperial Assembly and were getting the Imperial Herald, every issue came with a letter for your clan that was from one of the big leaders or, legendary characters from that clan. And in the beginning, that was really kind of before the internet. So you got your clans, and then you'd have to try to talk to people to find out what the other clans were. And I was very fortunate owning a store at that time. I ended up trading. I actually have with me here a binder. I have all of the letters.
Wow.
From all of the clans. But I had to go through a lot of trading to get that. But it was a big deal. Like you would learn story stuff, right? And then you would be talking with your friends, talking about it, right? And then like, oh, I learned this. And they would tell you about what they learned and stuff. And then we would make photocopies and trade each other the letters and all of that stuff. And I had a big enough player base that there was at least one person from every clan. And so I was able to get all of the clan letters.
That's probably an impressive binder at this point.
Well, it's fairly thick, yeah.
You talked a little bit about like when you worked for Wizards of the Coast and when you were a brand manager. What was it like going from like a player and a store owner to like working on it kind of behind the scenes?
It was a little surreal. I think I talked about, then I wrote one of the first forwards I wrote for the Imperial Herald, talked about how it wasn't that long ago that I was talking with my friends like, well, if I was in charge, I would do this. And I don't understand why they're not doing that. And I would love to see more of this. And then all of a sudden, I had the job that was kind of directing that. And so that was really kind of surreal and very exciting, and also a little bit intimidating because I know how passionate the fan base is.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of them. I was still passionate about the game. And so I didn't want to let it down, right? It's like I wanted to make sure it continued to thrive and grow. And then I had at Gen Con 2000, I had the dubious honor of discussing what the clans were going to be for Gold Edition. And they had up to that point, 13 clans. And I cut it down to six or seven. I'm sorry, I can't remember one of the two. And people were devastated. They actually had like plexiglass up in front of me because they thought people would throw stuff at me, and
oh my goodness,
they're just going to be really so upset. And it went well, but people were devastated. There was a guy there from Australia that played Mantis Clan, and that was one of the clans that was cut. And he was just bawling. And after talking to him for about 10 minutes, his friends literally drug him away.
Oh,
right? I felt really bad for the guy because he was just like, no, you can't do it. Like, he was just devastated. Maybe some people got a little too into it, but it was something that was needed for the game. I stand by the decision that was made. That was already made when I came on, and I stood by it because if you're going to have a game that tells this big, massive story, everybody wants to be involved in the story.
mm-hmm.
And if you try to include 13 clans in everything you try to do, nobody's going to get their time in the sun or do anything interesting or exciting at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to pare it way down and really get back into the story aspect of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot to wrangle if you're not.
Yeah, there was one group of players that I met at an event afterward, like a month or so later, I went to an event at the Watsy Game Center, I think. And they presented me with a shirt saying that I was the butcher of Rokugan.
Oh no!
And they did it in good, like they weren't rude about, it was done in good humor. I thought it was pretty funny. It was clever.
Yeah. What other memories do you have of like interacting with the fan community?
I still have. Wasn't that Gen Con? I think maybe it was that Gen Con. It was that Gen Con or one before or after where we did, maybe it was the one after, we gave out little banners for your clan, right? On a pole, like had a little pole and people were attaching their backpacks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people sign it and got, I don't know, scores of signatures on there. And I have that hanging up in my game room still today.
Yeah.
So that was really cool, right? And just to see people, that like Brian Reese, who grew up with the game basically, right? And then went on to do it professionally for a while, and he's still involved in it. And he's got a wife and kids and all of that stuff, but he still has a love for the game and a love for the world, right? So
yeah.
So it's that kind of stuff, and it's the people. There were a lot of really cool people there. Joe Fulgram, I don't know, it's just so many. I can't, but it was great people. It was great interaction, and it was a great community. And there's still people out there, Mark Armitage still runs like a villains dinner at Gen Con every year, I think, right? Where they get together. They were big Scorpion players, then Shadowland players and all that stuff. He's a great guy. I ran into him at the Star Wars Championships in Vegas this past year here. And now seeing the excitement for like the novels and the Champions of Rokugan, that's a game I wanted for L5R for the past, I don't know, 12 plus years, right? And so super excited for that to come out next year. The deal, Gilles from Monolith talked about how the deal took like 5 minutes to put together, right? My boss at the time Mark Nunes, I said, I'd really like to talk to those guys. And I knew he knew them. He's like, I'll make an introduction. We came in, I was in one of my trips to Paris, came in, we sat down. I said, I want you guys to make this game. And they're like, we really want to make this game too. Here's the check for an advance. Let's talk about what we're going to do. I'm like, sold, let's do it.
Yeah. So this is the cooperative, to use their term, like
Yeah.
miniatures game. It's a board game, but there's what, like 106?
It's a board game, but it has a lot of miniatures to it, and you're exploring different parts of different villages. It's got all these beautiful maps to it. I was fortunate to get to play it multiple times before I retired and see the sculpts. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I'll tell you, I have three of the sculpts they gave me before I left. So that was pretty exciting. I have those painted up in my miniatures cabinet. Super excited that the game is everything I wanted it to be, right? And then some. And I know that you all are super excited about it. I've talked to Brian Mulcahy, he played it at the Cannes Game Festival this year, and he loves it. I think people are going to be blown away by it, and I can't wait to see what they do next.
Yeah, I think we're verging on like $2 million for what they were able to source for it. Right. So it was very successful too. Mm-hmm. And it's got like a global reach, I think, in a way that I guess L5R has. Like, I hear tales of like French players and German players. Like, it's always had a little bit of not a little, but it's always reached people around the globe.
Yeah, particularly France has always had a pretty big community for it, and Germany, yeah, but France in particular. So yeah, I went to Gen Con this year and I had lunch with Gilles and we talked about it quite a bit. And then I was very fortunate last weekend, I was at Gamehole Con, and Michael, who runs Edge Studios, ran me and my family, my wife, son, and his wife, through a 4-hour L5R adventure. So that was off the books. We just did it on a Friday. It was a ton of fun. We had a great time.
I feel like not every game necessarily gets to have people that are huge fans of it, like working on the game and like bringing the products to life that they want to see.
Oh, Michael's a mega fan of the property. I like to think I know a lot about it, but sometimes I've talked to him a lot about it over the year, before I left and everything. There were times he would bring something up and like, what? What are you talking? Like, are you sure? And he was right. So.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was cool.
Let me ask you, so what are some of your favorite products that came out for L5R, like across the span? Like which ones like hold the most like memories for you?
I'm a big fan of the card game, obviously. That original game was so special. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to match that. I think I look back at the mechanics of it now. That's not what really drove that game. It was everything else around it, right? The role-playing game has always been very special to me. I think, I don't know if that's been announced yet. Office Dog has a game coming out that I think is going to come out next year that I think is going to be amazing.
Tessin was announced at Gen Con.
All right. I couldn't remember if it was for sure or not. But yes, Tessin is going to be fantastic. So Luke Petersmith, who was in charge of that studio for a while, I hired him at Asmodee. The funny story with that is he hired me to be a brand manager at Wizards of the Coast. And he was, L5R was one of the games under him. And he hired me to do a terrible Marvel trading card game. It was really bad. And luckily, actually, before I worked on that for a few months, and then he transferred me over to Legend of the Five Rings. And we just talked endlessly about it. I've still got information that he gave me about the world and about the brand and how to manage it that I saved my entire career. That was really good. And I learned a ton from him. And then a few years ago, I was fortunate enough to bring him onto the team when I was in charge of all the studios for Asmodee. And he put out River of Gold as a great game. Mm-hmm. Really fun. Whether you're a fan of L5R or not, the mechanics are great. I think Tessin is going to be spectacular. What I saw of it, I played a very, very early version of it before I left. I'm excited about that. I'm super excited about Champions of Rokugan. Because like I said, not only am I excited about playing that game, but then I can use the miniatures in L5R role-playing games too.
Right?
Yes. I'm already 3D printing stuff that people have with generic samurai stuff out there, so I can build a whole thing with it, right? It was sad that the LCG didn't have a longer lifespan, but FFG figured out quite rightly that competitive LCGs just don't work. Mm-hmm. They have a certain lifespan to them, and then they're going to decline. And I think part of it was, the reason AEG sold it was their player base had declined, right? If it would have been a huge success, John would not have let it go. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't enough players to carry it too far forward. It was a big success for FFG for about the first 18 months, and then it really started dropping off. And I think there was a lot of reasons. They couldn't get in a big enough new infusion of players, and there wasn't enough of the old players to carry through, right? Which is why it passed his FFG in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But that saying, it had its day in the sun. That 18 months, it was really popular through there. And you all did some cool stuff with the story, right? Resetting it. I know some people are like, why didn't we continue the story that was there? But there was no way in the world for a new publisher to step in and try to take in and absorb 20 plus years of lore and history and canon. It was just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody that played through all of that and was a brand manager for some of it, some of that old stuff was fantastic and some of it wasn't. So I think it needed a fresh new start.
Mm-hmm.
And now people can pick and choose what they want to do. I mean, I know that even in Champions of Rokugan, they put in some stuff from the old timeline, right? But again, I think I said this early on, I think that Clan Wars novel that came out this summer is the best L5R novel ever. And I have read them all, every single one of them at least once. I mean, it was my job for a while to read them, but so, yeah.
JT Nicholas and Julie Kagawa really did a phenomenal job. I guess, what are some of the highlights for you, or what do you think about it like really elevates that novel for you?
The depth that it shows of the different characters, and I don't know how to say some of the stuff that I really liked about it without giving away too many spoilers, right? But I liked the points of view that were shown. Toturi has always been a fascinating character for me and one of my favorite characters. Bayushi Kachiko is also always super interesting, and so to see stuff going on with her, and then just the politics that surrounded what's going on with the war and the stuff with the crab. The crab is one of my wife's favorite clans. She's a crab and scorpion big fan, and they got a raw deal there.
Yeah.
You could see how they would take the path that they took reading the book.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people are like, well, why would they do what they did? Well, it was that or die, really.
Yeah.
So it was cool. Kuniyori's always been a fascinating character, so it was neat to see his stuff in there. And Hida Kasada's like a force of nature, right? I think the confrontation between Toturi and Shoju is really cool and really epic and leaves questions that will be answered in following novels.
Mm-hmm.
I could also talk about the Daijoji Shin novels a little bit because Crane is my least favorite clan and he's one of my favorite characters.
Oh, wow.
And people listening to this that know me from a long time in my history with the brand know that the Crane is my least favorite clan of all of them. And my daughter-in-law is playing a Crane in the L5R game I'm about to run, but that's okay. Daijoji Shin has become one of my favorite characters, and that says a lot of the talent of the story team and the authors to put that together. He's just such a great character, and he's so interesting. And those books really show you the flavor and the feel and the vibe of Rokugan,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what I look for in stories when they're about L5R. Does it feel like this is the world? Because sometimes they don't, right? And when you read fiction that doesn't quite hit, it's disappointing. But man, those just hit so hard. You see little facets of the world that just shine out, and you're like, oh yeah, that's Rokugan. That's exactly how it would be, right? And the way he navigates and the politics of it and how clever he is and the trouble he gets into, and then his crab bodyguard is fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, those are great. Big fan of those. Look forward to lots more of those.
Yeah. Since I have you, I'm kind of curious, what to you makes something like of Rokugan as opposed to like a fantastical feudal Japan, of which there are many that people can like play in, but what do you think makes Rokugan so special, or like what makes a story like Rokugani?
That's a very good question. I think it's the clans. The setting is a great setting. It's the clans, though, that bring it to life and how they hit different psychographical profiles. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's something for everybody in there. And there's strong emotions. Each clan has a strong personality to it. And to see those interact with each other and conflict with each other, and then sometimes have to ally with each other, you know, like the Ichiban duology shows that really, really well. You have these different clans that don't really get along, but they have to because there's a bigger threat, and you see them being manipulated and you see what's going on. And I think those two books also really showed the heart of Rokugan, how you have to, some people are willing to put their personal feelings aside for the greater good. Some of them aren't. And then there's consequences for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the characters live, some of them die, some of them make mistakes, and there's consequences for mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really interesting duology too, because Edge Studio was putting out a remake or reimagining of the original Tomb of the Ichiban product with their Tomb of the Ichiban. And then Evan Dicken got to write these, like this set of duologies, which actually take place, I think, hundreds of years before the events of Adventures in Rokugan. But I think one of the challenges, like as a storyteller and as people who come into the world, is how do you give 7 different, very distinct factions like the spotlight time
Yeah.
that they deserve? And not all of our novels that Aconyte Books puts out like can hold all 7 clans. Like sometimes,
No, you can't. And trying to put them all in a meaningful way in every book would be a mistake,
mhm.
right? And I think you've been lucky, or Aconite's been very lucky to have some great writers. And I think a couple of the early books missed a few places too, to be honest, right? I'm not going to just pretend that everything has been the best ever, right? Some are better than others. But the ones I talked about have really shined, really, really shined. And that's where you can tell where it comes through, right? The world comes through, the characters, how they act, what's going on, the setting, it really comes through. And I think that really comes down to the characters, the clans, and how they are and how they act, and how some step out and some don't, and what the consequences of actions are. And we see people for the clan wars, they didn't help the crab, and now there's going to be big consequences for that.
Yeah, the characters, I think, especially from the early days, but there's been memorable characters across the franchise's history. Do you have a favorite character?
I do, and it's an original character. Togashi Yakuni is my favorite character. I would say multiple dragons. I was a big Hitomi fan. I'm also a big Toturi fan. I think Toturi is one of the best characters in the setting, period, right? I always thought Baishi Kachiko was very interesting. Yeah, those are probably my absolute favorites.
Can you tell me a little bit about why, like, Togashi Okunia stands out for you? I know you said John Wick explained it. You had like this dramatic.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cheat, right? Because as I learned the game, that's the card he got pulled, and he told me all this stuff. It was super hyped to my eye. Like I was just like, oh, that's the coolest character,
Yeah.
And so that was just destined to be the coolest character ever, right? So for me, but the others, just the way the story unfolded and stuff with the clans. Like I said, I like the Lion Clan, and then Taturi's tragic fall and redemption and all of that, and yeah. But then that led through some dark stories. I didn't care for the darkness storyline that was done, after a lot of that stuff.
Mm.
Scorpion Clan Coup is an amazing story. Those characters are cool. I think some of the newer characters, like I said, Daijoji Shin has become a favorite character of mine.
Hmm.
I can't even believe I'm saying that, but it's true.
Yeah, the crane, the mortal enemies of the lion.
Yeah, yeah. So kudos to the team and Josh for that, because yeah, that took a lot.
Are there any other stories set in Rokugan that have stuck with you or moments from the past 30 years that stand out?
Oh, sure. There's more than we have time for, but some particular things of lore was, the very first day of Thunder with the Seven Thunders, and hearing a bit about that story. I'd love to see a novelization of that.
Yeah.
That's an amazing foundational historical event, really, that shaped the empire. And how the original Kami fell and had the contest, and Togashi withdrew from the contest saying, I know what's going to happen here. I don't need to be a part of this. And
Hmm.
so that's all really interesting to me. The second day of Thunder was one of the best stories, just absolutely incredible. And then the rise of Fu Lang and Daigatsu, and dealing with all of that stuff. And like the relationship between Kachiko and Hataru, and how they're trying to balance that out between their clans and each other, and all of that is very interesting. So it's this epic drama that has such intimate personal stuff attached to it that I think you don't see that very often, and is very, very interesting to me. There's great moments, like that was just a clan pack where you see Hataru kill the Lion Clan champion with a bow, right? That set a lot of events in motion that had these huge consequences, right? And that's really amazing.
Yeah, the mixture of an epic fantasy with characters who, like, their personal stories shape what's going on. Yes, having something like that goes on for 30 years. Yeah, you don't see many like it.
Oh, yeah. And I expect it'll keep going on, right? I mean, it's just past that tipping point. It's taken on a life of its own.
Hmm.
And I'm in a cool position now where I can just enjoy it as a fan. I don't have to think about budgets or schedules or timelines or any of that other stuff. I can just, when the stuff comes out, I can just enjoy it.
So, looking back on your career with L5R, were there any lessons that the brand taught you about business, about storytelling, or about yourself?
Yes, it certainly taught me a lot about storytelling that I've used in some of the various roles that I've held in my career. And it taught me some about myself, about how I was so dedicated to the game and walked away from the game, but it still held a special place in my heart and just, being able to let things go. And when I became brand manager, I was talking to the team at AEG that was working on it, and I said, "Look, I know everybody knows I'm a Dragon fan. I'm not going to let that cloud my judgment." And Dave Williams took me aside. It's like, "Well, you have to let that cloud your judgment. Part of the reason the game's successful is because the people working on it are so passionate about it." And so that's something that kind of informed me from a business point of view as well, and
Mm.
as well as a personal point of view, right? And so I let that shine through. They may not have liked some of the decisions I made because of that, but I think it shaped things correctly. And also just to see the community, it made me absolutely realize beyond a shadow of a doubt that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Hmm.
I'd always felt that way, but that really cemented it for me. And you could just see it. People would come like into my store and see this and want to be a part of it. People at Gen Con, when the bonsais were going off and whatnot, they're like, what is going on? Right? It would just draw people in, and then they were interested and curious. And then the setting and the stories and the characters are so cool, it would bring people in. And to see the longevity of it, to know that if you do something that has that kind of quality and that kind of passion behind it, it will endure. So you're celebrating the 30th anniversary this year. I expect it to go on for decades to come. There's no reason why it won't.
Hmm.
Now, I know people would like to see the old card game come back or whatnot, but I think it's evolved. The marketplace has evolved. The fan base has evolved. So I think we're going to see amazing L5R products, whatever they are, for decades and decades to come. More cool stories from Aconyte, more stuff from Monolith, RPG content, whatever, board games like Tessin and River of Gold. There's going to be more and more of that to continue to come out.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline too that people,
Yeah.
there's so much. And people, I guess we're so lucky that so many talented individuals are working on this, like whether it's like the Monolith team or the authors and the editors at Aconite. It's a passionate community and also passionate people that have been working on it.
Oh, sure. Gilles and that Monolith team are all huge fans. I'm telling you, before I left, many conversations I had with them, they were sweating bullets going, "Oh, it's not good enough yet. It's not good enough yet." Right. And it's just, they wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. Right. And so it got pushed a little bit because they weren't happy with it. We weren't happy. We had conversations like, "Oh, we could give us more time. We can make it better." Right. And Michael from Edge is a huge fan. He didn't have to run that game for me and my family, but I saw him at Gen Con. He's like, "Are you going to be at Game Hole Con?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going with my family. I'm going to run an L5R game for you." Okay. And he put a lot of work into it. He had custom character sheets and maps and everything done, and he had
Wow.
music set up. It was great. It was wonderful. Right. But that just shows how passionate he is about the world. Right.
Hmm.
And so, and I know Brian is, I know you are. Clearly, some of these writers are clearly passionate about it.
Absolutely. I think it all shines through in their work. And I think that passion, both from the people working on L5R and the fans themselves, like that's what's going to keep L5R going long into the future. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about L5R. It's been so great to get your insights from your time spent working on the brand. This audio recording is copyright Asmodee North America Incorporated, 2025. All rights reserved. Produced and published by Aconyte Books. Legend of the Five Rings and the Legend of the Five Rings logo are trademarks or registered trademarks of Asmodee North America. Stay up to date with all the news from Rokugan and sign up for the official newsletter at l5r.com. Subscribe to the Play to Win podcast from Aconyte Books for more episodes of 30 Years of Legend of the Five Rings.